What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which we have not talked about since last November. Just yesterday, from the time of this video, it received a new gameplay video and some explanations from the devs talking about a few different aspects of it, and naturally, as it's one of the games I'm looking forward to this year, one way or the other, I'd like to go over it and share my thoughts with you guys. So, right away, I would say overall this showing was definitely a mixed bag. There are aspects of it that I think were actually better than I expected, and there were certainly parts of it that I would say confirmed some of my concerns with their previous showing back in November. So with that in mind, we'll probably split this video in between things I liked and things I didn't, frankly, or some just general thoughts. For those who happen to have missed the showing back in November, though, it was revealed that the game is being developed by the Chinese Room, who is known mostly for atmospheric walking simulators as opposed to big RPGs like this, and that the game is going to be headed up by a protagonist named Phyre, an elder vampire who originally entered torpor, or a long state of rest, in the Middle East before being woken up in Seattle, very lost as to why they are there. Phyre can be either male or female, that choice is up to you, but they didn't really show much in the way of character creation, though we know we will have a choice between 4 different clans of vampire, those being the Tremere, Ventrue, Brujah, or the Banu Hakim. We got some interesting information about the clans in particular. For starters, each of them is going to come with a passive in relation to their feeding. This seems to have replaced the resonance system, and when they feed, it correlates to something they gain. So in this case, this gameplay showing a Brujah and a full combat approach goes into a rage state when they feed. We don't know what the others are, they didn't quite talk about those, but it's likely to assume they correspond with some other play style, as Tremere are known for their blood magic, Ventrue are known to be leaders, and Banu Hakim are known to be seekers of justice, let's say. Each of these will also apparently come with an ability tree of sorts that's going to let you pick a few different abilities, and while we only saw a couple of the Brujahs at play here, they were pretty cool from what I've seen, so this does give me hope that they're going to vary up the differences between each clan a substantial amount, and make them feel different to play. And that's one of the things that I think looked a little better than I thought, alongside combat in general. While some of the individual punches and animations here and there looked a little janky, as this is, I would say, more of a AA project, by and large, it had more impact than I thought it was going to. There was a lot of really cool animations. I think the abilities can look pretty cool. And while I wouldn't say it's incredible or anything, I do think it looks pretty good overall. Now, on the story side of things, we know that Phyre wakes up with a voice in her head in the form of Fabian, and a mysterious mark on their hand that is sapping their strength, and this is the reason our elder vampire isn't quite up to snuff with what you might be expecting from one, but overall is still someone to be feared. To this end, they showcased an early mission, again with a Brujah version of Phyre, tracking down a Nosferatu who has information that they want, which turns into some weird psychological trap they have to fight their way out of, which honestly looked pretty good. From an atmosphere standpoint, I think they nailed it, which isn't too much of a surprise given their previous work, but I do think this interaction leaves a lot to be desired in terms of actual, I would say, role play. For starters, I would have much preferred a silent, more ambiguous protagonist. For instance, they refer to Phyre in the conversation as the Nomad, which I think would have been a much more ambiguous place to allow you to fill in your own character rather than the seemingly more set in stone version. Because it appears they want this character to be vague enough to allow you to do that, but then still insist upon giving you a very specific name and prior location. For instance, we know that Phyre was from the Middle East before being transported to Seattle somehow. And it definitely seems like a situation where they want to have their cake and eat it too, and I just don't think it's going to land properly. And speaking of that, the voice in your head thing with Fabian is going to get old real quick. You can tell from just what little they showed that it is not a lot of meaningful interaction with that character, and it's mostly just pointing out things that are very obvious to basically anyone. For instance, when you find William, Fabian's like, oh, I guess that's him, as if it would be anyone else. And in general, that is a tactic to storytelling that a lot of people have a bit of distaste for, including myself. And while I don't think it's impossible to pull off, more often than not, it just comes across as annoying, and we've seen this in games many, many times. So for their sake, I sincerely hope there's a built-in game option to shut down a lot of that optional dialogue and keep it to just the mandatory stuff. Now, the rest of my complaints, I would say, are mostly centered around things we didn't see and thus are ambiguous. For instance, it doesn't look like like there's going to be weapons available to us, and while it's possible that they're in there, it seems unlikely, and while that's not necessarily a deal breaker in a vampire-related game, we are dealing with a game where weapons had a more prominent place in the previous entry, so that's going to come up. We also didn't see much in the way of exploration outside of a very set specific mission location after a very specific character. And while I don't think there's anything wrong with that, this looked interesting, I'm very curious to see how exploration and things work now, because we know that prior to the change in developer, and even the prior game, used a bit of a hub system, and we don't really see that on display here, so I'm curious if that's still the case or if they're taking a different approach, because I think people will care, frankly. And I know I certainly will. We also have yet to see what character creation looks like. Is there any customization to Phyre, or is it set in stone and you simply pick a clan and things like that, and then progression through ability trees, as this is apparently more of an action RPG, it would seem in some ways. And then further still, there are, I would say, more ambiguous issues, for instance, conversations not actually showing you the specific dialogue you're about to say, but rather just giving you the gist of it, which I'm never a fan of in an RPG. We also don't see things like choice and consequence played out, and for an extended gameplay reveal, I think those things are important. This was your chance to show a lot of those things. And while as reveals go, I think this was better than I was anticipating, truth be told, for the reasons I've already laid out, there's also still a noticeable lack of information on any of the other clans, exploration, gameplay features, etc. So despite now having more information that reasonably looks good, we're still largely in the same place we were, which is looking for more information about how some of this stuff is going to come together. Though in general, I am happy that I saw a few things that looked pretty solid. We still don't really have enough information, I think, to nail down any good reasons to get excited for this one. So with that in mind, I simply hope they show more and soon. But with this footage apparently being post-alpha footage, and the game itself releasing just later this year in the fall sometime more than likely, we shouldn't have all that much longer to wait. But in the meantime, that's pretty much everything I've got for you today. I certainly hope you enjoyed the video and this look at everything. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.